The NBA Finals is due to start on June 6th coming up. There's been a bit of a hiatus, but we really actually ended up getting a really interesting matchup, although the conference finals were pretty underwhelming. I think we got a great matchup in the NBA Finals, the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. And on one side, you're looking at a team that everybody thought they were going to be there. The Celtics have dominated this year. They clinched first place in the East, with 12 games left in the regular season, which is kind of unheard of, doesn't really happen. But to kind of less of a surprise in the factor that they did that, the East has never been worse. And especially if you factor the injuries that they went up against in the postseason, the East has never been worse. So Boston, the team that was supposed to be there, is there. But then you look at Dallas, a team that kind of at the beginning of the year, I don't think anybody thought they'd be there. We didn't know if Kyrie and Luka, we didn't know if that whole thing was even going to work. Kyrie hadn't really worked with his previous situations, and this one was looking bad too. They had fallen out of the play-in situation at the time of the whole thing, and it just wasn't really looking good for them. And then they just make every right move around their two pieces. They made every right move, whether it was drafting a Derek Lively at 10, which really panned out, one of the better players that they've acquired, that anybody acquired in that draft. So really good pick out of them. The midseason trades, PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, two players that have just elevated this team to kind of another stratosphere. And then you also factor that they probably have, if not the best, without question, the second best NBA player in the league in Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic, with the ability that he has in some of these games, I don't think I've ever seen a player in the NBA be able to make contested shots the way he's able to. It's ridiculous. It really is. But then you have Kyrie, becomes a grown-up. You have all the pieces around them playing really well at the right time. And you have this finals matchup with these two teams that is just kind of, it's eerily similar to the path that Dallas had to go on in 2011 to win it. And I don't think it's that far-fetched to say that this series is kind of like that series. You have, back then, you had the Dirk-led Mavericks against the Miami Heat team with LeBron James, all the flash, the Heatles, and all the weight of expectation was on Miami. Not a lot of it was on Dallas. They were the fourth. Nobody expected them to win. I want to say they were the fourth seed, higher seed like that, kind of similar to what they are now. And they used that. They put the pressure on Miami, and they ended up winning that series. Look at this year. Who's the pressure on in this finals? It's not Dallas. It's Boston. There's a lot of pressure on Boston. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, the two J's. There's a lot of pressure on Boston to win this title because they've kind of been in the conversation for years now. If you look at 2018, they were in the conference finals, and I know they were super young, but that was a while ago. Still no title. They were probably a better team than the Warriors when they matched up in the finals just 2 years ago. Didn't win. Last year, lost to an 8-seed Miami Heat team before the finals, in the conference finals. Now, you're in a playoff series where you've dominated the whole year, dominated the postseason, even though I think it's very fraudulent. But you're in a position now where all the pressure is on Boston. If you even look at the betting odds, it's favoring Boston. It's been favoring Boston. I was on FanDuel when the conference finals had just started. And I saw a bet that said, I went to the NBA championship section, and it was Boston Celtics or the field. Boston Celtics or the field. That's how confident people are in Boston. And if they lose, what do you even do? They're never going to be better. Jaylen Brown's been paid. Got to pay Tatum. You're not going to have money for all the depth that you have right now if you're Boston. You'll never be better. They will never be better. So it's going to be a really interesting series. Do I think that Dallas can win this series? Yeah. And I think it's really down to those first two games. Can Dallas steal a game in Boston? I think game one is going to be pivotal. If Dallas gets game one, it's going to be big. And that's another reason why I just think that Dallas can win this series. You have the two best closers debatably in the NBA in Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. If you look at it, Boston doesn't have that. Boston does not have the guaranteed closers. And the big story is, if Boston wants to win the series, Jason Tatum's going to have to play like the best player on that team. He's going to have to if they want to win it. So with all things being said, with what I've seen through this postseason, we also have to factor that the Celtics are not particularly ready for this level of competition. They really haven't played anybody. They got Miami without Jimmy Butler. They got Cleveland in 2 games without Donovan Mitchell. And they got an Indiana Pacers team not only without Tyrese Halliburton, but a team that should not have been there. And you put that all together, and it's kind of like a boxer going into a fight, and you're playing for the belt, but you've played all scrubs before. You're going to get knocked out. And they might get knocked out in game one. Now, well, they're not. The series is going to be terribly lopsided. I'm not saying that. But they might get hit hard in game 1 and 2. They haven't been used to this level of competition. So we'll see what happens with it. But I think it's going to be a competitive series. I just like the fact that Dallas has closers. They have guys that have hit big shots before. They have an NBA champion, Kyrie Irving. Kyrie, maybe he goes back into it's a revenge series for him against Boston. People in Boston don't like him. He doesn't like them. It's going to be good. I got Dallas in 7. Call me crazy. Call me all you want to say. But I just think if you look at the fact that I think the Celtics might get punched in the mouth in game 1 and 2, and the fact that the two best closers are wearing blue and white, I just think that with all that being a factor, that Dallas is going to take this in 7. But we'll see. It's going to be a really exciting series. Starts June 6th. I'm excited for it, and we will see what happens.